Hey guys, look, we got lumber. I was honestly driving by, fire ants biting me. I was honestly driving by on my way to go check on my mom. She lives down in the historical district in McKinney. And I thought on a whim I would drive by and see what's going on and have your lumber package dropped. So today I'm gonna talk to you about 3 things having to do with framing and what you need to be aware of when you're building a new home. And for those of you guys watching in YouTube land, we're in Frisco. This is called Lexington, that's the neighborhood. And the builder is the awesome Toll Brothers company. All right, let's go talk about some lumber. All right, guys, this right here are joists. These are joists, okay? So these are engineered joists because the middle stuff, anytime you see that crazy, funky pattern, that's OSB, Omni Strand Board. And then you can see this piece of lumber has been routed and it's capping both the top and the top and the bottom of a piece of OSB. This creates a joist. Now, I'm not all that smart. I know that because it says joist. Now, what these are used for are usually up in the attic or in the second story, between the first and the second story. This is the thing that gives strength for the second story to sit on or for your attic to sit on. So joists are usually up in the ceiling or up in the attic, depending on if it's a 1 or 2 story. All right, over here, these beams, you can always tell what they are because they're marked on here, right? These are number 2 2x8s at 14 foot, okay? So these beams are number 2s, and that's why you're seeing some splitting. There'll be a few knots. See how that board just, right? All right, so let me spin you around. So lumber comes typically from most lumber yards in 3 grades. Number 2, which is Number 1, which is pretty good stuff. It's straight, it's true. It doesn't have a lot of knots. It doesn't have a lot of, I call it scarification, but it doesn't have a lot of this. Can you see that? It doesn't have a lot of that on it. Number 1s are usually straight and clean, and that's what most of your quality home builders use in the important pieces of the house. You can use number 2 2x4s in the walls and a few other places if you want to save some money, but most good builders, the majority of their lumber is number 1. Then there's select grade, and select grade is going to be a very true, very straight, it's a piece of artwork in lumber. Let's face it, guys. It's the apex, right? Select, though, is rarely seen on a build job site of a production builder. It's usually done by a custom home builder. And quite honestly, you know, those guys could be paying $5 to $10 million bucks for a home. So everything in that needs to be perfect. And that's a select grade. I will tell you a funny little story. I met a guy that builds really high-end custom homes, and he used to go to the lumber yard, and this dude would hand pick every board. Now look, let me step out here at the risk of getting run over. Look at this. Look at all this lumber. Can you see all this lumber? I mean, look at all these pallets, right? Look at all these bits and pieces. And he's got a list, a checklist, right? He's got a schedule. And that schedule lists every board, how many of them, what size they are, where they're to go, and all that. And that cat would hand pick every one. And he would only look at select grade lumber, and he'd hand pick every one of those. Now, what I can tell you is I've been walking around and I've been looking at most of the lumber, and it looks pretty good for the most part. There's a little bit of lumber I'm hoping they're going to toss out, but overall, most of it's pretty clean. It looks like it's quality. There's a few boards, you know, it's kind of like 1 or 2 bad teeth. You can straighten them up. They can cut off the bad part and use it. And most builders will give your framing crew overage. Okay, that's a lot of detail about lumber, way more than you wanted. But overall, the lumber drop looks fairly clean. We'll see. Its most important thing is when it's erected, which pieces do they use? And that comes down to the framing crew's competence. Okay, number 2. So number 1 is the quality of lumber, right? It's number 2, number 1, or select. The second thing is retention, right? And if you remember, I'm not going to go over there because it's super muddy, but if you remember in the foundation, they put all thread, right? And then they have some galvanized steel straps that are in the cement, right? When the cement was wet, those items went down in the cement cured, they're locked into your foundation. Now, there will be holes drilled in your base plates and some other pieces of lumber that will slide down over the all thread, and then washers and nuts will screw down to it where you're framing the house, if you will will not come off that foundation. It will take a massive force to pry that off the foundation. I don't know. I guess an argument could be made that that stuff is adhered so tightly to the concrete that the wall itself might break and pull off the house, say in a tornado or something crazy, right? Before it would literally leave the foundation. It would have to tear it apart. That's the only way to get it off, I would think. I can't back that up with factual information. It's just that sucker's bolted down about every 3 to 4 feet with all thread. That's in a very heavy foundation, and that's super stable. That's what you need to know. Now, lastly, well, we've got the quality of the lumber. Then we've got the retention of the framing once it's up to this foundation. That's how the house becomes solid. And then lastly is the quality of the craftsmanship or the framing crew's expertise, right? And then as a bonus equation, your construction manager will actually come out here and double check everything they've done. So if that all makes sense, great. If it doesn't, don't worry about it. The Toll Brothers have always framed good homes for my clients. It's just, I want you guys to know, number one, the important bits and pieces of your house are your foundation and your lumber, because that sets the tone for everything else. Imagine this. If we don't frame a straight wall, I'm patting lumber. Can you tell? I'm like, oh, good lumber. If we don't frame correctly and straight, how are you ever going to get drywall that runs straight? You see what I mean? If your framing is off, it throws everything else off. All right, guys, I hope you're doing great. I hope you're having a beautiful Saturday. And as always, may God keep and bless you and cause his face to shine upon you and bless your marriage, because y'all are still newlyweds. All right, y'all have a good day. This is good lumber.